Hello friends, this is Biman Gandhi from BusinessWise again. Yet another episode on LeaderShift. Ever since we have started talking about this LeaderShift, we have been receiving lots of interest and positive responses from our audiences, and that encourages us to bring more and more proactive leaders on this our talk show called LeaderShift. Today we have Dr. Ravindra Utgikar, who is the Vice President of Corporate Strategy and Marketing with Praj Industries, which is a pride of Pune, with us as a guest. I am excited to read about his professional journey. Ravindra is both engineer and a doctor. He got his engineering graduation from University of Pune in the discipline of Electronics and Telecom, and from the same university later in 2014 he obtained his doctorate in international marketing strategies. Dr. Ravindra often features as a keynote speaker on variety of forums as well as some of the academic institutes. To name a few like Pumba, Pennsylvania State University, or Nanyang, Singapore. He also pens down his thoughts as an author in form of case studies, lots of research paper and articles on variety of subjects, which includes business growth strategies, key account management, wind power and transmission. Today we have pleasure of having Dr. Ravindra Utgikar from Praj Industries as our guest. And I think today's conversation on leadership is going to be quite interesting for the people who are already into leadership role, as well as the people who are looking forward to become a leader. Utgikar, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate your initiative of reaching out. And I'm excited about this conversation, and I'm sure we can create value for our network. Yeah.
Okay. So starting with my first question, when we talk about leadership, typically people say, it's not about rank, it's not about title or any designation. In other words, it's not a milestone. Leadership is a journey. And when we talk about journey, you always evolve.
Yeah.
So how did it happen in your case as a person, as a professional, and finally as a leader?
That's a great question to get started. So, you can only connect dots looking backwards. So let me see, when I reflect on my journey, I clearly find that one of the strong contributor to anybody's evolution as a leader is opportunity to work with great people.
Right.
And those not necessarily are your bosses, but also your peer groups, also your subordinates. Because you are constantly working with people, deriving inspiration. That's fundamentally it. And I was also very fortunate to work with some outstanding professionals, work under some outstanding professionals, and work with some really competent colleagues. So I think that is one. But additionally, as I look back, I have always been a big fan of reading.
Okay.
So Ziegler, Maxwell, Stephen Covey, Jack Welch, and some of these great leadership books is something which always excited me. So I think somewhere there was always a belief that you need to not just read but try to bring in practice what you have read. So that is another influence that I can think. Working with great people, reading high quality books. And third, is leadership is all around us. So you have great political leaders, you have great sport leaders, you have great social leaders.
Someone whom you can look up to.
Someone who you can look up to, someone who you see is actually making the change happen, taking people in the direction that a team or a nation wants to go, or a society wants to move forward. So I think there are multiple influences, and I think that is what actually can be stated as an evolution of any leader. I'm really no exception to it.
Okay, thank you for that remark. I mentioned about your 3-decade long career.
Yes.
Now in 3 decades, I am sure
Yes.
a lot has changed. My previous question was about how it has evolved for
Yes.
you. So obviously a lot of things have changed. What kind of challenges you have seen and how things are happening nowadays?
So to be honest, leadership had always challenge of leading people, keeping people motivated, showing them the right direction, the challenges of a leader is constantly to evolve with time, constantly to look ahead of the curve and carve a path that is not for just as an individual path, but also for the setup as a whole. So the challenges for the leaders over a period, if you look back, have remained the same. To keep people motivated, to constantly look for new directions in solutions, to constantly create new leaders. So some of these challenges have always stayed. But I think if you look in today's context, with the passage of time, we are seeing that there is a diminishing set of loyalty, trust. People tend to switch jobs, and we are talking this more in a corporate parallel. So earlier, you remember when we started our careers, people used to join companies and stay there till the end of their thing. Except for now military organization or maybe government organizations, people tend to change jobs, particularly new generation, every 2 years, 3 years. So you don't have quote unquote as loyal a lot as you earlier used to be. So how to keep employees motivated, constantly on the growth path, no matter what the economic conditions swing up and down at times, how to keep them together has been a challenge, and it was there in the past, but more so now. With the advent of internet, I think there are more and more options opening up. People are becoming more savvy, more demanding. Competition is hyper. So leaders to that extent need to modify their style. They are talking to much better informed subordinates. They are talking to much competitive colleagues and perhaps peers. So I think to that extent, how you can keep yourself, up to date with this, set an example or stay a step or two ahead, has been the challenges of a leader, I would say.
Okay. So in the same 3 decades that we have been talking about, you work with some of the large Indian companies, some of the companies that we can really be very, very proud of. Even the Praj industry, pride of Pune.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
So I believe, based on my experience, that organization has a great role to play in order to evolve you as a leader.
Right.
How influential it has been in your case?
So organizations have tremendous influence on your evolution or anybody's evolution as a leader. In my case, I started my career by working with SME, which typically it used to be one apartment company making power electronics equipments and solutions. So what we today is parlance call as startup.
Okay.
So I started, so to say, in today's terminology, working with a startup where anything and everything comes your way, you will have to do it to the perfection, do it to the stakeholder satisfaction. So I think that's where the whole initial grooming of leadership came in. Then eventually I started working for Tata's. I clearly found that ethics, integrity, some of the values that Tata Group is known for, trust, loyalty, actually have a big influence in shaping your career. Then, I was fortunate to work internationally with multinationals, with customers spanning across 5 continents, consultants as well, traveled extensively. So there I was subjected to different leadership styles. Some of were purely team driven, like the ones typically you find in Europe, and some of them were purely enterprising, like you find, for example, in North America or USA. And then again there are combinations here and there. So I think some of that have always had some subtle influence in evolution as a leader. And then I had also opportunity to work with legendary entrepreneur businessmen or techno entrepreneurs. So I think their ability to see things ahead of the curve, their vision that separates them from the pack, also to that extent had influence on me. Attention to details, because details may sound as a small thing, but all those small things put together makes really a fantastic or great achievement. So some of these things also played a big part in, I think, my evolution as a leader. So to give you answer point blank, organizations have a huge role to play in one's evolution as a leader. Yes.
Great. Leaders also, said to be operating on their value system, or we call it as virtue.
Yes.
So if you go back to your memory lane, which all virtues that you started with, and which all values or virtues that you picked up on the way?
I think that's a great question. One more time. See, having born in a middle class family that values education, the things like honesty, integrity, passion, commitment, which are the traits of any leader, came naturally. We were always told to pursue what you enjoy doing. I think that's so important for leadership. Develop trust. So some of those qualities came in as a part of upbringing. So I think that's the baseline that comes in. But I think as you enter the professional world and as you get exposure to different leaders around the world, by way of interacting with them, by way of watching them, by way of reading about them, things like how to be a better communicator, how to develop affable leadership, how to be techno savvy for that matter, how to keep yourself abreast of geopolitical things, how to keep yourself abreast of economic developments. So I think somewhere the ability to connect dots between all this spaghetti also made a big difference. So I think that is again one big evolution in my journey, which I think I picked up as a matter of way forward. So, and then some finer aspects like how to identify risks, how to mitigate them, a very important part of leadership role, because not always the things will be very rosy and the way they will go as planned. So I think your ability to see risk. Then I think being proactive, because some of these things actually come by way of observations. And as we say now, the learning is a continuous process. So every time you are meeting good people, people who have influenced you. Simon Sinek is, for that matter, a great thought leader. You keep listening to his talks, and some of the things that he speaks have big influence. TED Talks, as as we are all familiar with, teach you about evolving concepts. So I think some of these things, that customer centricity is one that matter. How the superior customer experience creates value for the organization. So some of these things you keep picking up over a period of time. So the baseline came from upbringing, reading, but I think subsequently a lot of that added by way of interaction with people.
If I'm not mistaken, in a couple of days' time, you are going to talk about this customer experience. Can you share? It was not part of my question, but
yeah, that's true. I mean, what we are witnessing now is in a hyper competitive environment where product differentiators are dying. New product development is not a matter of choice but a business imperative. Competition from Me Too players, so emittents, pricing at a bottom side and matching feature on the technology side, matching service features. So all this, is a big catch-up game. It's like being on the treadmill. So what we are seeing is product differentiators are dying, product life cycles are flattening up, new product development is all the time happening, and everybody is into this race together. So what is that unique glue that actually you can bind yourself with your customers? And that is to create a superior customer experience every time you engage with customers. End of the day, that's unique to you, unique to the organization, unique to the people that you have. How do your customers feel following the interaction with you is a question that you constantly need to ask. And it's not a one-off exercise. So from concept to commissioning and care for life. So throughout the life cycle, across the numerous touch points with customers, how do you pay attention to creating a superior customer experience that he will have a wow feeling, and with that a superior emotional quotient and top of mind recall? It's something that leaders constantly need to carve out. And I think customers experience is the next big thing. That it was always there in B2C consumer segment, but B2B is closely catching up. So I think it's a very interesting concept.
And I'll be, of course, watching that very, very.
Most pleasure. Be my guest.
Great interest. Thank you for sharing. I think like you said, customer experience is going to be the most important attribute when it comes to business or industries. Now coming back to our discussion, when we talk about the leaders are always under constant stress. The moment you talk about leadership, you talk about challenges, you talk about uncertainty, you talk about stress. So, and leaders also, do experience the stress, and that stress sometimes is also keeping up the image.
Yeah.
An image of unshakable trust or
Yes.
unwavering faith.
Yes.
What has been your experience on that?
That's true. I mean, you are only a leader if there are followers.
Yeah.
And the followers will continue to be with you, come sun, come rain, as long as they enjoy your unwavering trust, no doubt about that. There have been times where that trust is put to test, whether it is economic ups and downs, whether it is rough weather in terms of project execution or order book and all that. So I think these are part and parcel. So dealing with VUCA environment, what we call VUCA, that term that was coined, is a part and parcel of every leader's leadership attribute. How well he copes up, there are no formulas there.
Yeah.
But I think his ability to empathize with stakeholders, with his followers especially, his ability to put himself in the shoes of the customers, the followers, his ability to communicate, convey the genuinity in his leadership, walking the talk every single time, I think makes sure that his followers continue to enjoy that trust. Because there will always be factors that will be outside your control. And they will always come around, they will come and go. But I think the leadership attribute need to stay, which is the trust. So I think good leaders are tested. That's they say now that the ships are built not for docking in the harbor, but
to sail in the sea.
To sail in the high seas, especially in the rough weather. And that's where the leadership is put to test. So I think we are being very fortunate that we have been put to harsh weather conditions. Whether it is Y2K bubble, double depreciation, subprime lending crisis, or the COVID is the recent one where there has been huge economic turbulence, where there has been huge geopolitical upheavals, where the leaders had to keep the faith and to maintain their temperament, composure, believe in long-term objectivity of organization, of the team, of the talent that they are nurturing. And I think that's where the leadership needs to be really tested. And there is no formula, but it's tested by fire.
Since we are on the topic of these challenges and the stress or managing the uncertain times, what do you think is the most difficult thing for a leader?
Most difficult thing for leader. Okay, I mean obviously. Coming good on expectations of his subordinates every single time, whether there are tailwinds or there are headwinds. And the leaders actually thrive because of the challenge that they see in this. So I think I wouldn't say it's the most difficult thing. It's part and parcel of the story that you have to. But conflict management is one aspect where leaders find a big challenge, that there are two equally demanding situations, which one should be the one is one for that matter. There are constant pressures from the top management about enhanced performance levels. There are constant push from the subordinates or peers or
even the market
or in the markets about superior delivery, notwithstanding the challenges that they have or the limitations that they have. So I think the leader's job is to navigate a path midst of this uncertainty, ambiguity. We call it a VUCA environment. That is a big challenge that leaders often face. So
you talked about top management, expectations from the subordinates or the peer groups, even satisfying the market conditions, or taking certain decisions based on those situations. And one of the things that is attached to leaders is taking unpopular decisions. A decision which probably does not go well with all the stakeholders or all the interested parties. Any example of that in your career?
All of us as leaders, no matter what our titles carry, have to take some hard decisions. But the objectivity is very important when you take those hard decisions.
Absolutely.
And many times, right sizing of the organization is one such hard decision. It means reshuffling the team. It means resizing the team. It sometimes means jobs rotation. And in the extreme situations, even letting people go. Mm-hmm. But I think if you keep objective focus, and as long as you can communicate that it is not about individual, it is not about one's ability, but a lot to do with several factors, then probably you are able to cope up with such things. Constantly keeping employees on the learning curve in terms of acquiring new skills, reskilling we call them, right, is one such thing, because after a certain time people have reluctance to go back to school, learn things by book, and actually unlearn and learn, as they say. So there you have to lead by example. And I think I've been fortunate again to work with people who have always inspired me to constantly be on the learning path. Most of my postgraduate education, whether it is my management or my doctorate program or some advanced courses that I have taken in specialized things like key account management in Switzerland or otherwise, have been while on the job. So constantly learning is, and people don't like to be pushed, particularly after beyond a time. So I think these are some of the things where you have to push people, and it's often some of the times appraisals meeting expectations of employees in terms of their growth, in terms of their pays, in terms of their promotions, is also, there are expectations are skyrocketing, and then there are budget constraints, there are organizational constraints, there are market constraints. So sometimes you have to take some tough decisions there, and still keep people motivated. Now you can't always have cake and eat it too. So there will be always some decisions which will not be so popular. But again, you have to stay objective and not take things personally or not speak things personally.
So managing uncertain situations, taking decisions, whether popular or unpopular decisions, these are anyway facets of leader. Another facet or the barometer, if you will, to measure the leadership is about their communication. Again, going back to my corporate career, I have seen leaders who have been really good when it comes to written communication, but not so good when it comes to verbal communication, or let's say even managing their body language, and vice versa as well. So what do you think, when it comes to communication, what makes a leader a complete leader from the communication aspect?
Communication has become a hygiene factor in leadership. It doesn't matter it's a written communication or a oral communication, or it's a presentation, or it's even a video recorded interview like this. You're constantly at a scrutiny. So one of the thing about leadership is you're constantly being put to test. You're constantly being measured.
And also under magnifying glass.
And in my role, I deal with media a lot. I deal with investor relations a lot. I deal with obviously customers a lot. And over a period, you develop a credibility about yourself, about what you say, you deliver. So you have to watch your words. So I think you have to be good with communication. There is no doubt. And more often than not today, the communication has become in multilingual form because the customers are global. So you have to make sure that you have the right tools, right translators, right support system by your side. You have to communicate affably, which means people need to feel what you intend is what you communicate. It cannot be just a politically correct talk. So I think communication is a hallmark of a great leader, and we see that all the time, whether it is our political leaders, whether it is top of the line business leaders or social leaders. It's often said, the leader is the one who rekindles hopes and aspirations of followers. And he can rekindle that only if he makes a heart-to-heart connection. So I think leading people affably, I think that was a line famously talked about J.R.D. Tata, which is so true. So communication has to be a complete and wholesome, no doubt about that.
So when it comes to dealing with different situations, we have seen one kind of never before kind of situation when pandemic hit us last year. I mean,
Yes.
the entire globe. So leaders do deal with situation, but because of those situations, emotions are natural to come back.
Yes.
And emotional intelligence,
Yes.
another attribute. I think that is one area where again leaders get tested.
Right.
Any such experience in your career where you think that emotional intelligence really helped you to deal with the situation in a much better way?
Emotional intelligence or a people quotient has always been underplayed earlier times. But today, with the advent of modern communication facilities where we are engaging on camera, whether no matter where you are sitting, I think it has become unprecedentedly important that you communicate with emotions built in it. Now, a leader would always face these issues where the emotions are running high, whether it is about managing a hyper competitive bid, for example, or big bang merger acquisition story, or dealing with the hostile investor community who constantly ask for more and more and more. So the emotions you can't separate out. And we have all seen that, whether it is on the sporting arena or whether it is in, again, political rallies, corporate world, no exception. So everywhere. I will only repeat what I said. You have to keep the objectivity in there, and you have to make sure that you don't get personal about it. If you stay objective, focus on your objective, focus on outcomes and not outputs. That's also an important part of the leadership. You have to stay focused on outcomes. How do you create impact? And then you will be able to set aside emotions a bit. They have got their own place. There is people bring a lot of passion into their work. There are a lot of emotions people attach. There is a great pride in winning, but you have to just, as a leader, you have to ask constantly the how part, not winning at any cost, but playing by the rule, playing honestly. So sometimes taking a very difficult decision of dropping out of a deal, or it could be a M&A deal which is hitting its maturity, which needs a courage, or whether it is bid no bid deal, or there are customers who are demanding some unreasonable or some out of line things. So it takes courage to take those decisions when emotions are running high, expectations are already laid out. So there will be times where emotions will run high. You have to stay focused, you have to stay objective. Importantly, you have to take your decision makers along the line. I think one of the things I should have mentioned in the earlier question that you had asked, that what do you learn as a leader when you evolve? So one of the things about leaders is about decision making.
Right.
And when you have some of these questions framed unpopular, we are always talking about taking a decision. So one of the big attributes of leader is to take decisions. But do you take decisions after aligning with the stakeholders? Do you communicate them effectively? Do you also see a world beyond that decision? Have you factored some of the fallbacks, consequences of that decision? And if you have factored in how well you communicate and how well you show your followers sunny side of that decision, which will help them even spring back to work the next day, is what the really leadership is all about.
A typical day of a leader is always filled with meetings, meeting after meeting after meeting, and meetings with different groups. I mean different audience, different topics, different agendas. Typically in a meeting, people have tendency to discuss people and not the issues. So as a leader, if you are in charge of that meeting, how will you help people to separate issues from the people? Because I believe that if you talk about the issues, people will be automatically taken care of. So how do you do that?
So again, like I said, always ask why. There's a nice book by Simon Sinek, Start with Why.
Start with why.
Never go to who. Who is the last part. So when you have that why and what questions coming in, instead of why and how questions coming in, instead of who, then I think people actually are disarmed. Because when you try to challenge people on the personal side of their decision, they feel defensive. They try to rationalize, they take posturing, and then you don't win. So the objective, the bigger objective, need to be put on the table first. And then, a thoughtful root cause analysis need to be done. So there is that why analysis. There are several management tools available. So the leaders, if they stay focused on the objective, focused on the purpose, focused on the problem, focused on the intent and the path to go there, then I think you are able to separate out. And then obviously the leadership is about people. Everything is about people. And people will make mistakes. So how do you make sure that people who have erred or probably misjudged the situation don't feel threatened? And that's very important thing, because there is something called agile learning, fail fast. All these concepts are being talked about, particularly in the IT arena, on the business to corporate, business to project side. There is not much room there. But I think as long as you empower people, as long as you draw the boundary conditions, as you draw the right processes, process orientation is again you need learn as a matter of evolution as a leader. Then I think the outcome should be a process based and not an individual based. And if someone is erring by breaching the process, you need to set that right.
Right.
So and for that you need to lead by example. So zero tolerance to process breach. It's something you have to make it very clear. So the ground rules you have to lay down at the very beginning. And then talk about, was the process followed? What are the things that went wrong? What else we could have done? Is there a better way to do it? Instead of trying to attack the person who is in question. Yeah. So I think it's not easy though, because invariably people will come in. But I think you have to take a very objective posture.
Yeah.
Of one that is leading to solutions in terms of right root cause analysis and potential solution, and ensure that the people who you are engaging with are not feeling overwhelmed or threatened, so that they get in a defensive mode, in a shell mode, because after all the problem is encompassing all of us. We are all of us in that boat. It doesn't matter where is the leak, it will eventually take down everybody.
Right.
So I think separating people from the issues is a very important part.
Yeah.
And then there will be people who will be erring, who will be making mistakes, and sometimes repeatedly. But then you make sure that you pull them up in private.
Yeah.
Coach them.
Yes.
Show them the way. Put them through a proper learning, unlearning programs. Yeah. There are development needs that you need to identify. So, not everyone of us have taken the path of getting into formal education system post our graduation and post graduation. But I think if that's the way, for example, with the advent of digitalization, there are several skills that are now required. So we'll have to go back to the basics and learn them. So it may mean that you have to reprimand people, but then do that in private. Show them objectivity, show them the path to do it, and give them opportunity.
So while doing all of this, this basically question was about, talking about the issues and not the people. When you are in the middle of meeting.
Yes.
One of the areas where leaders normally fail is, when they start playing favorites. Natural expectation from leader is to, treat everybody equally, which is a natural expectation. But there will be situations which will demand sizing up the people to their size. Any experience on that?
These things will happen. There will be times when X will perform better and he will be the flavor of the season, and Y will perform better in another time. Yeah. So when you are working as a team, you have to, again, it's like just a sporting analogy. There will be some games where somebody will click, there will be other games when another will click, there will be...
It's a team game.
It's a team game. It always is a team sport. So there will be time that somebody will be favorite for the performance that he has delivered.
At that point of time.
At that point of time. And then you have to make sure that that performance is infectious or motivates the other people. So I call peer group learning. Yeah. So among the subordinates, there will be always, it's like organization where there are different business units. Some perform at some point in time, other perform at another point in time. There will be cyclical ups and downs. There will be policy that will favor some businesses, and it will dissuade some businesses. But you have to stay patient. Yeah. So if somebody is winning, you have to make sure that he stays motivated to continue to win. So there is undoubtedly you need to encourage him to strive harder. At the same time, somebody who has not won, you have to do hand holding. You have to make sure that he has to persist. He has to play a patience game, he has to play a time game, he has to bide by his time, or for that matter, be proactive about changing few things in his controlled set of environment under his control to win the game. So playing favorites continuously is not done. I mean, because that's detrimental to a leadership. But I think giving justice to a talent, it's like that Formula One race, no? That someone who is speeding his car constantly behind you can't be in his way. So some people will be fast movers, some people you have to put on fast track, more challenging assignments, and you have to be all for it.
Yeah, great. Okay, so before we end, my final question, and my final question actually goes back to the first question. It's about the evolution of leadership. The environment, the situation is constantly evolving and it is becoming more and more challenging. So for upcoming leaders, what will be your message for them to take up when they take up the leadership?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I'm at a position where to give message or something like that. A lot of what we have spoken, I can only share some of these experiences, some of these pearls of wisdom that I have picked up from the people I have worked with. That leadership is a journey. It's probably an unending journey. You have to be at it all the time. You have to have a lot of empathy. You can only lead people when you empathize with them, put yourself in their shoes, think what else they can do. So I think walking the talk is another thing, that you whatever you commit, you must deliver. Whether it is just one simple phone call or a business commitment or a meeting commitment, it has to be honored, because that's how you are building your track record or a repute, and it takes a lot of time to build that. Doesn't take much
and preserve those things, right?
Preserve those things. So, and then we have to be constantly learning new things, because if you have achieved leadership position, doesn't guarantee that you will stay as a leader. So you have to constantly evolve yourself, whether it is new technology, new trends. You asked about customer experience, a concept that is catching up in last few years, which never existed in the past, where the product's features used to dominate and the sale would happen, or the price advantage would dominate and the sale would happen. But in a hyper competitive environment, customer experience is making all the differentiation. So I think leader will have to constantly acquire new skills. He has to constantly look for things ahead of the curve. For that, he needs to be abreast with a dynamic economic environment, political environment, business environment, to sense opportunities before others can sense. So I think a lot of reading is something which I strongly recommend. And above all, you have to be passionate about it. You have to have a lot of, and I would end by I'm big fond of Jack Welch, and Jack Welch always says that energize, execution, and edge are the 4 attributes of leadership. So I think if we keep high energy levels, if we make our energy level contagious to people so that we can energize them, we can keep our edge in terms of understanding business acumen, in terms of staying on the proposal, and finally whatever we do, we must execute. So these 4 E's of Jack Welch, what he has told, are the fantastic way leaders can move forward.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your thoughts, your views. And I think, I really enjoyed, crafting those questions, but I'm sure, the answers that you gave or responses that you gave in response to those questions are going to inspire people, are going to inspire leaders, both who are already into leadership roles and the people who are upcoming. So thank you so much, Dr. Ravindra Utgikar.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed being here. I hope this creates value for the network that you have built, and I look forward to another opportunity of engaging.
Yeah, thank you.